Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
Author David Halperin's new book tells the story of a teenage boy who copes with his difficult family situation by writing a journal of his fantasy world. Professor Halperin recently sat down with North Carolina BOOKWATCH host D.G. Martin to talk about the Journal of a UFO Investigator.
How did you make the Jerusalem, the 6-Day War, or the pre-6-Day War Israel intersected and interwoven with the aliens and the UFOs who have also infiltrated your novel?
Well, people, this is extraordinary, DG. That Jerusalem, if you want to deal with alienness and with other worlds, Jerusalem is the place to do it. There's an extraordinary mythology of Jerusalem that makes it a border town, as it were, between earth and heaven. And compound this with that before the 6-Day War of 1967, Jerusalem was a city sitting right on a border with a wall running through it, barbed wire fence, dividing Israeli Jerusalem from Jordanian Jerusalem, and for each side, the other was an unattainable alien realm. So Jerusalem is another dimension to that whole theme.
The way you explain,
it's
it's a natural place for a science fiction UFO novel to go.
To me, it was. To me, it was. To me, the Jerusalem mythology is as fantastic and amazing as any of this.
Yeah, if a Bible scholar who wants to get into science fiction, this would be a good place to start, because you edges the Old Testament scholarship and the whole Jerusalem experience into UFOs, and that leads me back to the question that you were just about to answer before I interrupted you, and that is the place of Ezekiel and other Old Testament and New Testament places where heaven comes down or earth goes up to heaven. And was there a real spaceship in Ezekiel? It's not just dry bones walking around, it's spaceships?
I don't think a spaceship at all. It may have been a UFO, but it wasn't a spaceship.
What's the difference?
Well, because let's say that the UFO is, and I'm going to use the Jungian language, which I think is very useful here. The UFO is the archetypal image that emerges from within us, and the spaceship is the modern conventionalization of it.
I see, okay.
And I would think that perhaps angels were the ancient conventionalization of it.
That's only if it's myth, is that we're imposing it. Then in Old Testament times, I would impose it via angels or something. Yeah. Now today I would say I saw a spaceship. But always from your point of view, it's not real, it's the myth inside.
But is myth real? Remember what Rochelle says to Daddy. Myths are real. If they weren't, they wouldn't stay around for centuries. They'd vanish like last year's top tunes.
All right, well now tell us, we're curious about Ezekiel's wheel, but most of us haven't read Ezekiel recently.
Well, you start out with the first chapter, which is, you'll find it very rough going. I find it very rough going. Ezekiel sees this extraordinary vision, a great cloud coming out of the north, a strong wind, fire flashing up. Out of the fire come 4 living creatures, each with 4 faces, 3 animal and 1 human. And then at first on the earth, and then it appears lifting up into the air, at first 1 wheel and then 4 wheels. A wheel within a wheel, and each wheel has eyes round about it. Now, what is Ezekiel talking about? I don't know. I assume that the lines on which we have to explore this are those of the imagery of the ancient Near East. There's a coin from Gaza from about 150 years after Ezekiel that shows a bearded god sitting on a winged chariot with an enormous wheel. And yet this iconography of the ancient Near East, to me, is not enough to explain what Ezekiel saw. And I think there is something coming out of his unconscious that grafts itself onto this iconography, just as I believe in modern times there's something coming out of our unconscious that grafts itself onto the familiar iconography of space vehicles.
You've been very clear in your conversation with us that you no longer believe in UFOs.
In the conventional sense.
And, I don't know what that means, but nevertheless, there is a strong, small but a strong group of very serious believers, and you must have, this title and this discussion must have put you back in contact with some of your former colleagues in the belief community.
Sure
and
has.
how's that been?
It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. So many of the people I corresponded with when we were teen ufologists in the 1960s now are still very interested in ufology in their 60s. And I must tell you, these are some of the most intelligent, some of the most serious people you'd ever want to deal with. And at least one of them who is still convinced that there is a phenomenon out there beyond whatever we graft onto it. He can ask me questions about this or that sighting. I can't begin to answer. I can only shrug and say, I don't know.
You can see all of DG's conversation with author David Halperin tomorrow night at 9:30 and again on Sunday at 5.
Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.